Welcome, everyone, to Sales Hiring, 5 Surprising Signs That a Sales Candidate Will Be a Bust. My name is Diana Berniker, and I will be the moderator for today's session. We're calling in from the Rapid Learning Institute headquarters, which is located near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm joined by our guest speaker who's calling in from Boston today. His name is Dave Kurlan. He developed the top-rated sales assessment tool. Hi, Dave. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Diana. Appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So the reason why we're hosting today's program is that we know that one of the biggest struggles sales managers and leaders face is attracting and retaining great talent. Once you get them on board, you need to give them the skills they need to succeed so that you can retain a high-performing sales team. And the Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center helps you do just that. It helps sales managers hire and build a better sales force. With over 80 video coaching programs that deliver one powerful selling concept in just 5 to 7 minutes. It's for experienced reps as well as new hires, and you can access it anytime, anywhere. And today's sales management expert, Dave Kurlan, will be sharing with you some of his proven research-based techniques to help you effectively evaluate sales candidates and make the right hire. Because, as you well know, even with seemingly great candidates, it can be difficult to separate the pretenders from the superstars. So at any point during today's presentation, you can ask questions. You can use that same questions box that's located on the right-hand side of your screen in the toolbar. And I want to let you know that right after this session, maybe 20 minutes after, we'll be sending you an email with a link to a survey. And I will appreciate you filling out this survey. It takes just a minute, and it helps us to develop these free programs. And if you do so as a thank you, we will be sending you a free ebook. Now I want to introduce today's host. His name is Mike Llewellyn. Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Hey, Diana. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Mike is a senior researcher and writer here at the Rapid Learning Institute. He's also a contributor to our blog. Before joining us here at RLI, he was a freelance writer and communications consultant whose clients included Whole Foods, Kohler, and TED conferences. He started his career as an editor for Philadelphia Magazine and holds his master's degree from Villanova University. And now I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker. As I said before, his name is Dave Kurlan. Welcome again, Dave.
Thank you again, Diana.
He developed the top sales assessment tool from 2011 to 2014. He's a best-selling author of Mindless Selling as well as Baseline Selling. He's the founder and CEO of the Objective Management Group Incorporated, as well as the CEO of Kurlan and Associates, which is a global leader in Salesforce development. Both appeared on Inc. magazine's list of the 5,000 fastest-growing privately held companies. So thank you both for joining us. And now, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Diana. And thanks to everybody who's joined us today. Dave, it's a pleasure to speak with you this morning. Okay, so let's jump into 5 surprising signs that a candidate will be a bust. Over the course of this event, we're going to ask you for your help in revealing 5 salesperson qualities that sound like strengths but can actually be flaws. So let's imagine you have an opening on your sales team, and today you're going to interview 5 candidates. For each candidate, I'm going to provide 4 qualities that sound great on paper but could be the candidate's hidden weakness. We're then going to turn it over to you to vote on which quality you think is the candidate's Achilles heel. Then we'll reveal the answer, and Dave will tell us about his research and why that particular quality can be problematic when you're evaluating sales candidates. Okay, let's get started and take a look at candidate number 1. Her name is Sarah. She's an impressive, qualified sales professional who looks like a great fit. Here are 4 key qualities that stood out to you after Sarah's interview. Number 1, she sets high goals for herself. Number 2, she's highly confident in her abilities. Number 3, she's very personable and easily connects with people. And number 4, she has an impressive book of business in her current role. While all of these sound great, one of them is a clue that she might break your heart if you hire her. So which one is it? Let's launch the poll so you can vote.
All right, so let me share with you how many of you have voted. Let's see. Looks like we're at 20%. We'll keep this up for about 3 more seconds, and then I'll share with you those answers. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and share those answers on screen.
Who won?
All right. So let's see. Looks like she's highly confident in her abilities is the winner there. Let's see if they're correct.
Well, interestingly, the one that scored the lowest with 11% is she's very personable and easily connects with other people. It's the one that turns out to be the warning sign according to Dave's research. So Dave, can you tell us why?
I'd be happy to. When someone is really personable and easily connects with people, more often than not, it's a symptom of the need to be liked. The technical term is need for approval. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people have the need to be liked. But in sales, when you have the need to be liked, or in severe cases, the need to be loved, bad things happen. So today, the most important thing for a salesperson is to differentiate themselves in the field. And in order to do that, you need to take a consultative approach, which requires asking a lot of questions, asking good, tough, timely questions, and having the conversation that nobody's ever had before with that particular prospect. The problem is, when you need to be liked, you can't ask those questions. People who need to be liked believe that asking questions, or a lot of them, especially the tough ones and the difficult ones, is rude, and they worry that the prospect will no longer like them or get upset or end the call or kick them out of the meeting, so they don't do it. And because of that, they end up sounding like every other salesperson who shies away from questions and focuses more on talking about what they can do and what they can offer. 54% of the sales population has this hidden weakness. And it's a difficult one to overcome because people who have it have had it all their lives, and you can't make it go away just because you realize, uh-oh, I have need for approval. And if you're managing salespeople like this, you have a better chance of helping them overcome the weakness than they have themselves of making it go away by magic, by giving them permission to fail, giving them permission to ask questions regardless of what might happen. And that makes it a little easier for that salesperson who needs to be liked to take the risk and ask the questions that they, to this point, haven't wanted to ask. Also, there's a lot of buzz about the challenger sale, and the challenger, in addition to asking those questions and pushing back, would challenge a prospect's thinking and push back on something they heard. And this is another thing that salespeople with need for approval have difficulty doing.
Now, Dave, I want to get to managing these folks a little bit, but first I wanted to ask you, what are some questions you could ask in an interview to reveal whether or not someone has this deep-seated need to be liked?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the questions I recommend asking is, and not right off the bat, but you could ask a question like, so if you're on a sales call and you had to choose between making sure you had a good relationship, making sure you were asking the tough questions, and getting the business, which one would you choose? And the person with need for approval will always choose maintaining the relationship.
All right, now, you've mentioned that this quality is difficult to overcome, and one of the clues you gave us for managing it is giving the person permission to fail. So are these candidates doomed to fail, or can you improve them? And can you give me an example of maybe how that would work or what that would look like?
Great question. So if we look at the elite salespeople, the top 7%, none of those people have need for approval. It's impossible to become elite if you maintain this weakness, because you just can't differentiate. You can't sell consultatively. You can't sell value. So they're not doomed, but they've got to be committed enough to being the best so that they can do the work to overcome the need for approval.
All right, great. We got a couple more candidates to take a look at, so I'd like to bring in candidate number 2. Your second candidate is Greg. After interviewing Greg for your sales position, folks, 4 things really made an impression. Number 1, he has a very positive attitude. Number 2, he's been in sales for almost 10 years. Number 3, he seems highly self-motivated. And number 4, he's enthusiastic about your product. So which one do you think is a potential red flag? Go ahead and answer the poll.
All right, so the poll's up on the screen now. You can select which of these traits you think could cause him to be a bust. It looks like about 20% of you have sent in your vote. Go ahead and select one now. We'll be closing this poll in about 5 seconds here. It looks like we might have a clear winner. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and share these results. The second winner has 33% of your votes, which is almost a tie to the fourth one at 29%. So which one is it, Mike?
Well, turns out that the correct answer is number 4. He's enthusiastic about your product. Dave, why would this quality potentially interfere with a salesperson's performance?
Great question. You know, enthusiasm is good, but enthusiasm can also be bad. You want a salesperson who loves what they're doing, but if they're too enthusiastic about the product and they bring that with them onto their calls and into the field, they can't wait to talk about the product. They can't wait to explain what it can do. They can't wait to share the features and the benefits and the bells and the whistles, and they rely on a slick demo or presentation. And if you remember what we were talking about before, the way you differentiate is by asking questions and making sure that they're good, tough, timely questions and having the conversation that nobody else wants to have. The salespeople who are most enthusiastic about the product just skip right to the demo because that's the thing they're most comfortable with, it's the thing they're most excited about, and that's the thing they focus on. And in today's day and age, all that does is commoditize the product that you have or commoditize the service that you have. The other thing that happens is as part of this enthusiasm, they tend to be a little bit emotional. And when they're emotional, they're not going to listen really well. When you're emotional, you're in your own head and you're consumed with your own thoughts and you're focused on what you're going to say next and you're not asking questions. And asking good questions requires active listening. And when you're in your own head, it's not active listening, there's no listening.
So are there things you can do in an interview situation to tease out whether or not a candidate is too emotional or too self-focused?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. You can ask a candidate. You've obviously had a chance to look at our website and do some research. How do you feel about what we sell? And you should be able to observe the emotions coming through. If they can respond calmly and clearly and articulate, if you can interrupt them and ask a question and they grasp the question and respond appropriately, chances are they did not get emotional. But if you have trouble interrupting them with a question or they don't hear the question right, chances are they did get emotional and they're in their head.
All right. Got it. So if I'm a sales manager, what I'm thinking right now is that I want my people to be at least somewhat enthusiastic about my product, right? So where do I draw the line?
Great question. The question is really, can they flip the switch? For instance, I'm not social. And you might wonder how a sales expert could be antisocial and not like people, but that's the real me. But I know how to throw the switch to turn that on when I need to. The question with the folks who are enthusiastic is, do they have the switch to turn it off so that they're only getting enthusiastic when it's finally time to make a timely, needs and cost appropriate presentation or demonstration, as opposed to wanting to rush to that point in the sales process.
All right, got it. All right, let's move on to candidate number 3. Her name is Lisa, and Lisa's interview went great, and it just left you with 4 main takeaways. 1, she's very ambitious. 2, she empathizes with discerning buyers. 3, she's committed to a long career in sales. And 4, she currently works for your biggest competitor. So which one of these could be Lisa's fatal flaw? Go ahead, folks, and take the poll.
All right, the poll is back up on the screen for Lisa. Which one of these traits do you think could be her fatal flaw? Looks like, let's see, about 40% of you have sent in your vote. I will give it just about 3 more seconds, and then we will go ahead and share your answers. All right, let's go ahead and share those answers. All right, so it looks like most of you said the second one. She empathizes with discerning buyers. So is that correct, Mike?
It turns out it is, and I guess because I'm a writer by trade, it surprises me. But Dave, can you tell me why empathizing with discerning buyers can be a sign of trouble?
Sure. It could be a sign of trouble. That's the caveat here, and you have to figure out whether it will be or it won't be. There's 2 kinds of empathy. On the good side, we want salespeople to empathize with the buyer's problems and frustrations and issues and opportunities. We want them to empathize with how it impacts them and the consequences of not fixing the problems. We don't want them to empathize with the buyer's stalls and put-offs and objections and excuses and sob stories and anything else that derails the opportunity for the salesperson. So the question is, do they have the good empathy, the bad empathy, or both?
So what kind of questions can you ask a candidate to tease that out?
Well, one of the things you can do is you can try throwing out an example of both. You can talk about your own challenges and frustrations and see if they ask you about them. You can say something like, you know, the last person who was in this territory struggled and didn't do so well, and just stop and see if questions follow and see how they respond to your answers to their questions. The other thing you could do is test them on the bad empathy. You can say something along the lines of, you know, we've identified 4 other candidates that we like, and I'm not sure that you're in the top 3, so we're going to have to think about whether or not we can move you into the top 3 or not. Basically, give the candidate a put-off. And if they understand it, you've got the wrong empathy. If they push back and ask a question, they don't have the bad empathy.
All right, that's really interesting. Now, these 2 kinds of empathy, is this a characteristic that's hardwired into people, or is it something they can turn off or on when they're talking to buyers?
It's behavioral, and not to say that we should be focusing on behavioral styles, but it's learned. And in this case, it can come from need for approval, not wanting to confront. And it can also come from the way they buy. You know, if they comparison shop, if they price shop, if they think it over, and the think it over thing is the put off that they might empathize with, if that's what they would do. The talking to 5 other candidates, that's the comparison shopping thing that they might do and understand. So there's a few different places that can come from.
All right, thanks. That's really interesting stuff. Now, before we move on to our 4th candidate, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Rapid Learning Institute and its Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center. Diana, can you take just a minute to tell us a little bit more about Selling Essentials?
Thanks, Mike and Dave. Dave, this is awesome information. And, you know, today we've been talking about avoiding hiring mistakes and, of course, hiring top sales talent. And that's only really part of the process. You need to give them the skills to succeed, and you need to give them skills that will help you to retain a high-performing sales team. So the Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center is both for new hires and experienced salespeople. It's an online system available from all mobile devices, as well as PCs and Macs. Each module that we have is 5 to 7 minutes long. They're short and focused on real-world selling problems and backed by solid research in sales psychology. So I'm going to go ahead and put up on screen real quick another poll, and this one is for a trial to the Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center. So there's 2 options here. If you're interested in starting a trial, go ahead and select that first option on the screen, and we'll give you full access to the system. We can even add some of your sales team members so you can really put in a beta test inside your organization. We'll help you through that. Second option here is for those of you who are interested but not quite ready for a trial, you just want a little bit more information, go ahead and select that option. I'm going to leave this up on the screen for just about 3 more seconds, and we're going to go ahead and get back to our meeting with Mike and Dave. All right, Mike, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Diana. Now let's meet candidate number 4. His name is Bill, and here are his strengths based on what you learned from Bill in his interview. Number 1, he easily establishes a good rapport with buyers. Number 2, he's great at closing sales. Number 3, he's a value seller. And number 4, he's dedicated to lifelong learning. So which of these 4 might actually be Bill's biggest weakness? Go ahead and answer the poll.
All right. So looks like about 20% of you have sent in your vote. We're going to keep this up for just a few more seconds. Looks like we have a tie here. Okay, let's see. Go ahead and share this poll. Like I said, it looks like there's about a tie, the first and the third. So Mike, tell us which one it is.
Turns out the answer is number 3. Dave's problem is he's a value seller. So I apologize. Bill's problem is he's a value seller. So Dave, please.
It could be a problem of mine too. Who knows? I am a value seller. And we like value sellers. We want people to be able to sell value. But sometimes people don't have the right understanding of what value selling is. A little history. Back in the 80s, companies first started coming up with the unique value proposition. And that ended up being a bunch of people sitting around a table wordsmithing what the unique value proposition was. And back in the 80s, that was selling value if salespeople could articulate that value proposition. But by the 90s, everybody had one. So the next step was added value. And companies started coming up with things that the customer would get above and in addition to what they were paying for. But by this decade, everybody had added value, so that was no longer value. And today, value comes in the field. Any survey of buyers would say that differentiation takes place in the field. That's the salesperson. So the thing you have to understand is that any information that a prospect can find online, if a salesperson comes in and basically has that information, they can talk about the product, they can talk about specs, they can talk about prices. That's totally redundant information. So if a salesperson thinks they're providing value by providing that information, they're basically making themselves obsolete. So if they have the wrong focus on what value selling is, that's a huge weakness because they're going to be talking about value instead of being the value, instead of being a resource, instead of bringing something to the table that's more important, more relevant, more valuable than what a prospect can find online. If they're selling value the right way and they are being the value, they are the value, they're indispensable to a prospect, that's what we're really looking for.
And to what extent is being a value seller tied to a reluctance to bring up money, do you think? Are the two things?
Thanks for bringing that up, because there's another hidden weakness, discomfort talking about money, that can cause the wrong kind of value seller to avoid talking about price because it's uncomfortable for them. And if you've got the wrong kind of value seller, they will avoid the money conversation, whereas the right kind of value seller will go right forward at the appropriate time and make sure that we're having a conversation about finance in the context of the problem that's being solved and what it might be costing.
All right, very interesting. So how can you find out whether or not a sales candidate has this value selling style or a reluctance to discuss price before you hire them?
Well, one of the questions you can ask to see how comfortable they are talking about money is to ask them how much money they've earned. Ask them what they've sold. Ask them questions about money. Now, in some states, there's new legislation coming out effective 2018 that makes it illegal to ask anybody what their income was. You should know if that's the case in your state, but right now it's perfectly legal to ask somebody what they earned last year. And just watch how comfortable they are talking about it. Ask them how they earned it. Ask them what they do with it. The other thing you can do is you can ask them to tell you about selling value. See what that means to them. That's just like asking somebody, tell me about the consultative selling approach. If you ask 100 candidates what that is, you'll get 100 different answers. The same is true with selling value.
So if you got somebody who who's a value salesperson or is really struggling with price reluctance, is it possible to coach them into being more comfortable talking about this?
It is, and it comes from a sales manager's ability to pre-call strategize, to know where they are in the sales process, to re-emphasize what might need to happen in this particular meeting or call, and to, again, give them permission to fail. As long as you ask this question, which candidate was this? This was Mike.
Oh.
No. What was its candidate's name?
We're talking about Bill, I think.
Bill. Thank you, Bill. Mike. Yeah, we say, Bill, I know it's uncomfortable for you when it comes to talking about money, but if you would please find a way to ask this question. I don't care what happens. I will be so happy and proud of you for just bringing money up and talking about it, that even if they pick you up and walk you out the door and tell you never to come back, I'll take you out to dinner.
Well, if he's also an approval seeker, then I think that'll work out great for him.
I do too.
So we've made it to our fifth and final candidate for this sales position. Candidate number 5 is Beth. And Beth has a great resume and 4 things that make her stand out from the pack. Number 1, she's a top producer at her current company. Number 2, she's strong at pipeline management. Number 3, she's recently earned an MBA. And number 4, she has several glowing references from her clients. So, folks, which one of these qualities could be a sign that hiring her would be a mistake? Go ahead and answer the poll.
All right. Let's see here. We have a clear winner right now at about 30% of you have voted. Let's see. About 5 more seconds. We'll keep this up. All right, let's go ahead and share this poll. Looks like number 3 is our favorite here. Mike, tell us which one it is.
Well, it turns out that the answer is number 1. She's a top producer at her current company. Dave, how could that possibly be a bad thing?
Right. Who would not want to hire somebody else's top producer? How could we be so stupid to be wary of another company's top producer? But let's think about that a little bit, especially if it's a younger versus older top producer. The question you've got to be wondering about is, what makes this salesperson the top producer? So who opened the accounts that this salesperson is selling to? So is it the top manager of revenue? In other words, my accounts generate more revenue than anybody else's accounts, therefore I'm the top producer? Or is it, I close more new business than anybody else in the company, therefore I'm the top producer? So if it's closing more new business, that definitely makes somebody a top producer. But if it's managing more dollars in revenue than anybody else, that would make this person an account manager. And it's very possible that this account manager inherited every single one of those accounts. And if you're hoping that this person's going to come on board and close new business for you, you might have the wrong person to do it.
So if I'm sitting across the table from, let's see, who is this? This is Beth. I'm sitting across the table from Beth. How do I figure out whether Beth is a real seller or just a great account manager?
Great question. And these last 2 candidates, obviously, Bill and Beth, weren't very memorable since neither of us could remember their names. So if we're sitting across from Beth and we learn that she was the the top producer at that company, I would start asking questions like, so how long were you in this territory, or how long have you been calling on this vertical? How long have you been the top producer? And what was the territory or the vertical or your accounts? What were they generating when you joined the company? And what are they generating today? And how much of that is new business? And how much of that is existing business from existing customers? And if you just start asking the kinds of questions, you'll figure it out without them admitting to anything. You just need to know. If you're looking for a hunter, it's not the account manager that's going to be able to do it. If you're looking for an account manager, Beth might be perfect if that's what she's been doing. And if you're hoping that Beth is going to bring all of her accounts with her, that's a completely different story. You never know whether those accounts will go with that salesperson or not. So that's always a coin flip.
All right, got it. Well, that's our 5 candidates. So Dave, on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. Now, I'm just going to take a quick minute to recap the 5 surprising signs that a sales candidate will be a bust. Number 1 is a need to be liked. Number 2 is a tendency to become emotional. Number 3 is to be too empathetic with buyers or with discerning buyers. Number 4, you're too uncomfortable discussing price or money. And number 5 is being a quote-unquote top performer, and that's, differentiating between real sellers and account managers. So, okay, before we get to audience questions, we want to give everyone a second chance to receive a free trial to the Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Selling Essentials. It's a sales talent development tool. It's over 80 5- to 7-minute modules. You can access them anytime, anywhere on desktop or mobile devices. It's designed for new entry-level hires and for experienced salespeople. They all cover one concept at a time. They're easy for managers to deploy, for coaching or training, easy for sales reps to get answers when they need them. So you can get access from yourself and your team, and you'll get access to the entire system, not just the demo. So the options on the screen will stay up during the Q&A session. And I also wanted to let everybody know that a recording of this session will be available soon after the call. And we're also would appreciate it very much. You'll receive this by email, a survey about the presentation. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill that out, that would be fantastic. So Diana, do you want to turn this over to some questions from the audience?
Would love to. All right, we have a few questions coming in. The first question is, we mainly see candidates telling us they are comfortable with selling, only to find out later that they aren't. How can they tell? Carla is wondering, how can they tell if they're lying in this situation?
That's a great question. I've seen this happen in so many companies where salespeople are uncomfortable with certain aspects of selling, but they don't even recognize it because it's hidden to them, and it's pretty difficult for them to articulate what they're uncomfortable with. They just, in most cases, they're uncomfortable with the core things a salesperson has to do. So how do you uncover that in an interview? It's pretty difficult to uncover that in an interview, and that's why it's so important to use an accurate and predictive sales-specific assessment, because you will be able to learn things about their sales capabilities and their self-limiting sales beliefs and their hidden sales weaknesses and their actual selling competencies that you could never get to come out in an interview. And this is one of those things. It's almost impossible to measure sales comfort level in an interview. And even if you could, you still wouldn't know whether they were being honest or they're telling you what you needed to hear. So the answer, and unfortunately it'll sound biased because it promotes the use of the very sales selection tool that we make, but the answer is to use an appropriate sales selection tool.
All right, the next question comes
Well, thanks very much for asking that question. I really appreciate it.
All right, so our next question, you just talked about sales assessments. What are the top 3 tests, assuming you'll put the OMG in that mix, that you would recommend using to uncover these sort of traits in sales candidates?
I love that question too. So I would absolutely put OMG at the top of the list because it's the only customizable, accurate, sales-specific, predictive sales candidate assessment on the planet. Now, there are plenty of other assessments that claim to be sales, but if you look deep and find that they're personality assessments and behavioral styles assessments. And there's nothing wrong with those. They're wonderful, but they're not predictive. And if it's not predictive, then it's not a sales selection tool. It's just an assessment. So beyond OMG, a lot of clients supplement the use of OMG with a personality assessment or with a behavioral style assessment. Now, I can name the most popular ones. Your listeners are probably familiar with DISC. That's a simple behavioral styles assessment. They're probably familiar with Predictive Index, another simple behavioral styles assessment. They're probably familiar with Caliper, which is a very well-known personality assessment, and Myers-Briggs, which is another well-known personality assessment. And you can use any and either of those along with OMG if you want to know more about a candidate's personality, which will tell you how they'll fit into your culture, or you want to know more about their behavioral styles, which will give you examples of the best way to manage those people. But if you want to know how they're going to perform on the phone or in the field, it's got to be sales specific, and it must be customizable and predictive.
All right. We actually have a great follow-up question to that from Natalie. Do you recommend running sales simulations during an interview?
Well, if you know how to run a sales simulation, I think that's good, but better than a sales simulation, if you don't tell them that it's a sales simulation and you think of it more as an audition, it's even better. So you treat the candidate the way a prospect might treat the candidate. So you don't tell them it's a simulation. You don't ask them how they would handle it. You just do to them, as the interviewer, the things that a buyer would do to them in real life. And then you watch how they handle it. When you tell somebody it's a simulation or you run a simulation, it's pretend. And most salespeople are capable of handling pretend. What they aren't capable of handling is real world.
All right. Suzanne asks, Beth was a salesperson with your competitor. This is one of the candidates we talked about in the presentation. And you briefly touched bringing accounts with her to your company. Is there ethics behind this? What are the general rules behind bringing accounts from another company?
Great question. Well, the first thing you need to know is if there's a non-compete in place. And if there's a non-compete in place, how long, how far, how wide, and you certainly don't want to be on the wrong end of a non-compete. So that's the ethical legal question. Beyond that, the question is, are they buying from your competitor because of this salesperson, or are they buying from your competitor because they're a great competitor? And that will help you to answer the question as to whether those customers are likely to follow Beth to your company or not.
All right. Our next question comes from Thomas. He says, there's a fine line between type A sales personalities and complete company disruptors. So how do you uncover this?
Type A sales personalities and company disruptors, were those the two?
Company disruptors and type AA. He actually said AA sales personalities. So he said it often equates to type AA personality.
Okay. So I don't think those are mutually exclusive. You can be a type B or C or D or E or F. You know, type A is that hard driving personality. I assume that's what we're alluding to. And a disruptor is somebody that causes problems on the sales force. So you don't have to be a type A to cause disruption, and a type A doesn't necessarily cause disruption. So there's no way in an interview to figure out whether the candidate's going to be a disruptor. And it's even difficult in an interview to determine whether they're a type A personality for real. So my rule of thumb is select salespeople based on their ability to go out and close new business to help you grow your company. Now, what can you do to protect yourself against them being disruptive? That's where a personality assessment comes in. And a personality assessment like Caliper or Myers-Briggs might give you some insight and alert you to the possibility that this particular candidate has the potential to do something like that.
All right. The next question from Jim is, do you think selling profitability versus selling value would be a better answer?
Selling was the first choice, profitability?
Yes.
Okay. So, value is different things in different businesses. This is more of a sales training thing than a sales selection thing. But one of the things that's important is ROI. And ROI is a component of value. And a lot of salespeople never think to ask the prospect what their expectations and requirements are when it comes to ROI. One prospect might say, we expect a 12-month payback. And another prospect might say, we expect a 5-year payback. And if your payback's going to be 3 years and they're expecting 1 year, there's no value to the prospect, regardless of what you do. The other thing that's important is to understand how you can frame your product or service and pricing in the context of something that would be valuable to them. Instead of saying this is our price, being able to price it in terms of it's this per year or this per incident or this per experience. There are just so many different ways of looking at it. So profitability, if you've got the kind of solution that can help make a company more profitable, is a great way to express value. But if they don't have profitability as a way to express value, it might not be the best thing. Sometimes value is not tangible. Sometimes value comes from how well you get a prospect, from how well you understand their situation, from how well you position yourself as uniquely capable of helping them solve their problem. There's more value in that than value in being able to save a company money if you give them peace of mind. So there are many ways to express value.
Okay, there's a few more questions coming in, so I want to get to those. I just want to remind everyone that we have this poll, this question up on the screen for you. If you're interested in a trial to the Selling Essentials Rapid Learning Center, go ahead and select that first option like we talked about before. There are over 80 modules in the system, all 5 to 7 minutes long, and focused on real-world and research-based information to help your sales team sell more. The second option there is if you're not quite ready for a trial, but you would like some more information, we'll have someone contact you. So go ahead and select one of those options if you're interested. And I want to move on to our next question. It's coming from Melissa. We're seeing a lot of job hoppers these days. Does that automatically mean that they are a bad hire?
It's a great question. And I guess for the second time, I have to bring up age. If it's a younger salesperson, that's what the millennials do. They hop from one job to another, and that's normal for millennials. So the question is, do you have an opportunity that's compelling enough and you have a growth path that's interesting enough that you can articulate to a young candidate that thus far has hopped around that would cause them to want to stay? If it's an older candidate that's hopped around, we have to find out what the motivation has been. For example, a lot of salespeople who've been attracted to startups it'd be really cool to work for a startup. And they work for 3 or 4 startups. The startups get acquired, and then they get rid of the organization that was in place. It's not their fault. So there's a difference between I'm going to change jobs because I think I can step up another level. I'm going to change jobs because I'm bored. I'm going to change jobs because I'm failing. I'm going to change jobs because I've been terminated, or I'm going to change jobs because the company went out of business, the company got acquired, the company did an acquisition, the company changed their go-to-market strategy, and it needs to be explored.
Okay, and our next question comes from Jim. The question is, are people honest when they take assessment tests, or do they give the answers they think you want to hear?
Great question. Depends on the assessment more than the candidate. A really good assessment will have all kinds of built-in tests within the test to look for and identify the test takers who aren't being completely honest in the process. With our assessment, we've got more than a dozen of those checkpoints built in where we're able to identify and report scoring confidence, how confident we are that this candidate answered the test honestly and consistently. And we find that overall, and we've assessed 1 million salespeople, and 5% at the outside attempt to manipulate the results and manipulate the findings. So most don't even try. Most approach it honestly. And one of the things you have to understand as to what would motivate someone to cheat is that there's a couple of different kinds of assessments. You've all seen the assessments that cause salespeople to pick the phrase that sounds most like them and pick the phrase that most represents how others see them. That inspires cheating. That motivates people to try to work the test. If you have an assessment like ours that asks very transparent questions and have very transparent answers to choose from, and all the answers are correct in their mind, they're all potential ways that a candidate could think about selling, could execute selling, all potentially things they've done when selling, all potentially things they want to do when they're selling. If there are no wrong answers and there are no clear this is the right answer and this isn't, they answer the thing that they select the choice that resonates with them because it looks to be the right answer, because it resonates. And so we've built an assessment that has answer choices that resonate with all salespeople. So we get very honest participation.
Okay, great. And Dave, if they're interested in that assessment, where can they go?
The easiest thing to do is send me an email at dkurlan, it's D as in David, Kurlan, K-U-R-L-A-N, at objectivemanagement.com, and I will forward their email to the appropriate person so that they can get the information they need.
And Dave, if they have any more questions from today's presentation, can they go ahead and email you there as well?
Oh, sure. I live on email. So happy to respond to any and all questions that come in. Happy to forward your emails to an appropriate person or expert. And if you want, you can learn a lot by going to my blog, because I blog about these things all the time. That's omghub.com. Oh my God. That's what it is today, but in 1990 when we started the company, OMG stood for Objective Management Group, so omghub.com.
Dave and Mike, thank you for your time today. We'll be sending that survey out right after this.
Thanks, Anna.
All right, you guys have a good day.